So pleased to introduce Kelly Matting. She's lived in the Rogue Valley since 1994 and held numerous local government positions from a planner national to deputy city manager in Medford to her current role as the operations manager for the Rogue Valley Transit. She enjoys going to meetings and taking long walks through the hallways of government buildings. And that's where I met Kelly for the first time years ago. I was in talking to people in the planning department at Jackson County, and she saw me confused and came up and said, "This is what you need." And ever since then, we've done a variety of different things together. So it's really a pleasure to introduce Kelly Matting with Rogue Valley Transit District, giving us an update.
Again, my name is Kelly Matting. I'm the operations director for RVTD. You probably have seen us in the newspaper recently. We had to lay off about 65 employees this last kind of 2 months and reduced our service significantly. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit about like how we're funded, because how we're funded is part of the state of Oregon and frankly, you. And what we've done, and I can answer any questions like the gentleman whose son needs to get from Talent to Ashland or Talent to Medford. We are still running that route. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of the status of this. So let's go. So RVTD's funding is a three-legged stool. This is like mini governments, frankly. We have federal money that we get, or we hope to get. We have local money and we have state money. I'm going to address the federal money really quick because that's one of the things you probably heard in the news that RVTD, one of the reasons we were cutting service is because our federal funding was in question and or late. And in fact, our federal funding right now is coming because there's a lawsuit. You may know that 20 states in the United States are called sanctuary states, many sanctuary cities in the state and the nation as well. And what the executive branch of the federal government has said is if you are a sanctuary state, we are going to withhold your funding that Congress has authorized. And so there's a lawsuit right now back east, probably will be finalized through the lower courts the beginning of the year and may go to the Supreme Court. And that court case is really about, does the executive branch have the authority to basically not carry out what Congress has appropriated? And then we have, so we're still up in the air on our federal money. And you can imagine that's 35%. So if we don't get that we're planning for that a little bit. Our local money is 38%, and I'll talk about that. And then our state money is 27%. So right now, and you may have heard of the transportation bill, it's gotten a lot of airplay. But the state is working on a transportation bill that the Senate will vote on the 17th of this month. And right now, transit, not Rogue Valley Transit District per se, but transit in general gets 0.1% It's a payroll tax. So basically what that is 1 penny for every $10. Now we get money that's generated from our local payroll tax. It's not that they take all of Oregon and kind of divide it by per capita or those kinds of things. So we get money that's directly associated with Jackson County. And what's happening with the transportation bill is, at least as it's written right now, there would be an additional 0.01%. So it's 0.1%. So what that would equal is 2 cents for every $10. But again, that's going to be voted on and not sure where that's going to go. Really just want to shout out to you all as a thank you from RVTD because you all pay a special levy on your property tax. It's 13 cents per thousand. It was voted on in 2019, 2020. It expires next year. Oh, right. Sorry about that. It's 17 cents. Our permanent rate is 17 cents, sorry, and our special levy is 13 cents. So our permanent rate doesn't change. That's not voter approved, but our special levy is voter approved. And that contributes about $2.7 million to RVTD. If that doesn't pass in 2026, we would have to make further cuts. So we're hoping that doesn't. And I want to thank you all for helping to pass that in 2020. We've seen significant cost escalation. I mean, who hasn't? So all of you have gone to the grocery store in the last 4 years and seen costs go up, or you've gone to get a piece of plywood and seen costs go up. And our costs are no different. Government's costs are actually no different than what you see and what you see in your business. So you can imagine that our costs are going up between about 8 to 10% a year, and our revenue is going up about 3 to 4%. So at some point, all of you, whether you're running your home business or you're running a business outside of the home, you can see where that leads. At some point, it leads to the fact that you cannot maintain the service level that you have. You can't maintain the lifestyle that you want. You can't maintain because your revenue is just not keeping up with your expenditures. We are working on reducing this where we can. For example, with our healthcare has gone up exponentially, just like I'm sure yours has. And we just recently took, the union voted and our employees voted to take less healthcare for less money, saving the district about $500,000 a year, which will go into service. So we've made some service changes and so I guess let me ask you, because I'm curious, how many of you have taken an RVTD bus in the last year? Okay. So for those of you who haven't, and if you did, you would be called a choice rider, right? You have a choice. You have a car, you can make a choice to ride or not ride. The people who don't have a choice are the vast majority of those who make up our ridership. They're people with disabilities, they're seniors, they're people who don't have cars and work. And they work at all the businesses that go to support all the other businesses that support all of us. So when we were cutting service, we tried to cut service in a way that still allowed people to get to their employment, still allowed people to get to the hospital, still allowed people to do some shopping. Because those are kind of the three things and go to school. So it's people going to school, people go shopping, people going to work, and people going to medical services. So we reduced the vast majority of our services, as you can see. Now, some of these you may have driven by, like a Route 25 in East Medford, and seen very few people on the bus because we put service in East Medford. And frankly, we were going to need to reassess that anyway, because we weren't just getting a lot of ridership in East Medford. Some of you live in East Medford. You don't take the bus. A lot of people in East Medford don't. So some of these we needed to right size, but there are others that really caused a lot of heartburn and heartache for our customers, like no Saturday service, because you can imagine that people who ride the bus to work, they're going to work just like all of us, right? And when do they go shopping? And when do they do their leisure? And it's mostly shopping that they're doing. It's on Saturdays. And now we don't have Saturday service anymore. We've reduced our weekday service. And we heard about this too, because there are lots of people who work later. We heard this especially from people in Medford and Ashland who are in the service industry. They make work at a restaurant or a bar, and they get off later, and they were taking the bus, and now there is no bus for them to take. The other thing are when we cut our service that it does, for example, we cut service to Eagle Point. So we have something that's called, and it's all of us have something that's called Valley Lift. I don't know if any of you or any of your relatives use Valley Lift, but it is for people that are on the Oregon Health Plan, that are on Medicaid, and I believe Medicare as well. This is services that we can come within 3/4 of a mile. If you live from a fixed route service, we'll come with a van and pick you up and take you directly to your service. It's like an Uber, and it costs $2. Yeah. So when we cut our service, our fixed route service, what happened is that Valley Lift was reduced. And so you have people that don't have the ability to get on a fixed route bus because they can't walk to it. They live 3/4 of a mile and they just can't get there. And they will not have service anymore. And I was thinking about this, it's not this Surgeon General, but I think the previous Surgeon General was talking about one of the major health risks that we all experience and that's isolation. And our service helps people not be isolated. Because if you don't have a car, and just imagine, and I actually, when I testified in front of the legislature, I left them, I was the last one to testify, and I left them with this. And I said, when you leave here, you leave this meeting and you walk outside, imagine that you don't have a car, and imagine that your family doesn't have a car and your friends don't have a car. What are you going to do if there is no transit service? And I'm not meaning to paint doom and gloom, but it's just like, those are some real things to think about when you think about transit, even if you don't use it. There are lots of people that do, and there are lots of people that work in places that you go to that take transit, that may struggle and not be able to get to work without it. But what we did was we kept our routes that are very popular. The 10, for example, is our most populated route that goes to Ashland, and it goes through South Medford, Phoenix, Talent to Ashland. We kept our route that goes out to White City. We kept our route that goes to Central Point. We kept, after the public hearings, we kept a route that goes over by Poplar because we heard from a lot of seniors. There's a lot of senior housing over by Poplar. We heard from them that without that route, they would not be able to get to shopping and or medical, because that route actually comes down to Front Street Station. And then we have a route that goes out to Rogue Regional Medical Center. We have a route that goes throughout West Medford. So we had a lot of routes that went through West Medford, and we consolidated them just to one route. So our routes serve about 80% of our ridership, plus or minus. And this is ridership that's still increasing after COVID, because COVID, as you can imagine, ridership declined rapidly. It still maintains about 78% of the service to of the populated areas. And that's why we chose those routes. And that's why the board of RVTD actually approved those routes. We were trying to still cover a lot of the same ground, but we also are covering it with less frequency. So for example, the buses going to Ashland used to go every 20 minutes. That's pretty good to be able to get on a bus in 20 minutes. Now it's 30 minutes. And believe it or not, that 10 minutes, it has increased. Like, our buses are full. In fact, I got an email from a guy, and actually he wasn't on the 10, he was on another bus. And he said, I can't even get on the bus anymore because it's so full, and I can't get on it predictably. So I need to come up with another way to get to my teaching job. So that's what the other thing that happens when we reduce service, but we are still running these routes. I just want, again, to impress upon you how important transit is. To be honest with you, I have worked in municipal government for 30 years, and I've never worked in transit. And when I took this job, I didn't have any experience in transit, didn't understand the culture of transit, or who wrote it, or who used it, or how it was paid for. And it's really paid for by all of us, helping people who are much less fortunate than us get around to do their job, to get to school, to get to medical appointments, and to get to shopping and some sort of modicum of leisure. I'm really proud to work for RVTD and this service that we provide. And I want to thank you all, because, like I said, without that levy, our service those cuts would even be deeper. And in 2026, when you see that on the ballot, and I can't lobby for it because I'm on public time right now. I'm just telling you, it will be on the ballot in 2026. And if it passes, we'll be able to continue the service, and maybe even expand service. And I'm hoping that it does. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, I have less of a question and more of an impact statement. So as most of you know, I'm the Executive Director at Living Opportunities. We support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Huge arm of that is supporting people to be employed in local businesses like anybody else. RVTD was one of those employers until recently, where 5 individuals that worked there were laid off in that grouping that she mentioned. Not only that, but we have had at least 18 individuals outside of those layoffs that rely upon Valley Lift and RVTD to get to their jobs. That now they have no transportation to get to work. So what are they left to do? We're helping them figure that out. That's a huge, huge issue for people who experience disabilities, people on low income. It really is their lifeline to our community. So this 1 cent for every $10, totally worth it when you look at the impact to the lives of those most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you for your presentation. As I'm sitting listening to you, I'm thinking, this is something that we as a community need, and we need to be finding other ways to fund this need in our community. And I'm wondering, like we do for the library, is there any possibility of some kind of a private foundation that would support transit that we could be contributing to? I'm thinking of a major fundraising effort. Yes, we do it in the levy. That's important. But those of us who have the capacity to make a difference and want to make this happen, do you see a vehicle or a way that we could do that?
I don't know. I am fairly new and I don't know how that would work, but I will look into that and I will communicate back with Claudette, because that's an interesting idea, because maybe it gives us another leg of that stool, for example, and makes us less reliant maybe on the federal government or the state government or government in general. So I'll look into that, but thank you so much.
I'm thinking, adopting a rider. What would the cost of adopting a rider be for a year? Whatever that number is, let's say it's $500. You could adopt 10 riders for $5,000, right? And then you could know that you're making a direct impact in what you're doing, and making sure we are taking care of those who don't have the ability to get to where they need to go.
Okay.
Thing. And I would imagine that there's many transit districts around that are having the same problem. So I'm sure, knowing you're going to network with them and find out what they're doing and how they're dealing with these problems, because, we've got jobs for people of all types. I was at Red Lobster and there was a special needs young man who was seeing us, who's very intense. I was so happy to see him there, but they've got to get a way to get to work, and even though we have bicycle lanes now, which is a big improvement, we're still a rural community. So I know I'm not going to hit that up.
Okay. Dang it.
I'm going to cut in just so I can get my question in. I agree with everybody, but I also want to ask if you can clarify, because I know this has been in the news lately, about supposedly this flush of money that the transportation district has that could be tapped into, that the choice was not to tap into it. And I know there's a lot more to that story, and I don't know if you can address that.
Okay. The transit district had resources and it had like savings, if you will. And we got a grant to expand our infrastructure. So a new building was built, but that was a $15 million building, and we spent about $2 million as match. We purchased the building downtown from RCC, which I think was a great move because it creates kind of a transit center there, and administration is there and dispatch is there. And so we spent some money on that. We have very few reserves at this point. In fact, our finance manager put together like a cash budget. Like, we do accounting in a certain governmental way. It's very obtuse. And none of us do that, right? Like, we do a cash budget. I get some cash that comes in. I look at what I want to spend it on. I make my house payment. I do whatever. She put together a cash budget for us. And with the levy, if the levy passes, we could maintain service for maintain this level of service or even a little bit better for the next 5 years. So if there's a rumor out there that RVTD is sitting on a pile of cash, I can assure you it is not.
Well, I too will make an impact statement, partly because I live in I'm comfortable and I live in incredible ignorance of what's happening in my own community. This is old enough ago that my wife and I entered a classified ad in the Mail Tribune, which shows you how old this is. But I've been paying property taxes for decades, but here's why. The ad said, daycare in our home, weekdays, pay minimum wage. And we got in the next 24 hours, 8 phone calls. And 7 of the 8 phone calls began with, where are you in relationship to the bus thing? I'll need to take a bus. It was like, say what? Honest to God, I have never been in an RVT bus, but that was a realization of, oh my God, this is actually incredibly important for people who are important in our lives. People who can be working at the bottom end of the young people, in some cases from the voices, I would say older people, but in any case, people who wanted minimum wage jobs in Southern Oregon were planning on taking the bus.
So Kelly, what is the plan, or these routes are current service, you're waiting for state and federal decisions. What kind of scenarios have you built out? I know I reached out to Kelly at the library. 20% of our staff rely on public transportation, and for a variety of reasons. It's a choice. Some people have chosen not to get a driver's license, so they rely on that public transportation. And that does have an impact on our business, to have that many staff who need to find other ways to get to work. So are there some lights at the end of some tunnels where we may be able to see some increased services in the near future? Or is this our status quo, unknown end date?
Carrie Mae, that's a great question. And so we went through this layoff, as you can imagine, super traumatic experience. And that all culminated right before September 2nd. So September 2nd was our new routes on our new frequency and no Saturday service. What I'm doing is giving people a little bit of breathing room to figure out this new reality that we're living in for the month of September. And then starting October, we'll start doing scenario planning. By that time, we'll know if the transportation bill passes, because it's either going to pass on the 17th or it's not. And if it doesn't, my guess is that nothing will be done until the next regular session. Frankly, I hope that does not happen, because I like to drive to Bend and I like to drive to California and I like to be able to get there even when it's snowing. And that there's going to be some question about whether that's going to happen or not as easily if this transportation bill doesn't pass. But if it doesn't, we have a scenario. We're looking at 2026. We have a levy that we are going to be working on. If the levy, we're going to assume it passes, let's say, and we're going to do some scenario planning, and we're going to do some planning if it does pass or it doesn't. The thing about the additional money from the state is we won't actually even get it until July of 2026. I'm not exactly sure why it will take so long, because the mechanism is set up already, but that's what the state is saying. So that's what it's going to be. If we get the levy, we won't get that until the following November. So there's some time. Nothing happens immediate, but we are going to start planning, because the reality is we want to get back to Saturday service. We want to get back to a better frequency. I mean, our goal is to provide service to people who need it. So we are going to be doing scenario planning starting in October. And then tune in, because the board is going to be looking at this levy and making some decisions on what it looks like going forward. And there'll be some public hearings that you and your staff could participate in as well. You know, the federal funding is really tricky, because there's this lawsuit. And also when we had our sort of federal audit, when they came, We said, we got our money late, and we had never gotten our money late. And he said, oh, well, expect it to be later next year, because they've lost so many staff that they don't have any experienced people working there. And I'll give you an example. So we did get some federal money and we went to draw it down. And usually our finance person presses a button and draws all the money down, comes all at once. Press the button, didn't come. She's like, that's so weird. Okay, well, let me try like 10% less. Tried that, didn't work. Called, the FTA, hey, what's going on? We don't know. So she just tried 50%, and she pressed the button and it came. Then the next time she had to draw down 50% of that 50%, because it never would allow us to draw down 100%. Why? I have no idea. So I think there's some discombobulation. Let me just be gentle saying that. And so I don't know. The federal money is the most up in the air, right? It's the lawsuit, it's the staffing. The state money and the local levy are very straightforward, and so I think we'll actually see some more predictability with that money than we will with the federal money for the next little while.
Kelly, I realize the current burning platform is the big problem, this year and next year, and how to get funding to do what you're doing. But not to sound too fanciful, but as you go out 5 years or 10 years and you still need to provide this service, what role does technology change? Do you see driverless vehicles being something that changes the network of capabilities for providing service in the Valley?
Absolutely. I mean, if there were driverless buses, I think it would look very different. And you're still going to have people. It may not be people sitting on the bus necessarily, or maybe you do like TriMet. If you go to get on the Max, while it does seem like it's really automated, there's still a person in there. Maybe that would be the case. I do think technology, in one sense, we're using it with, fareless ride. So you're not putting money in anymore, which speeds things up. And, different kinds of fuel will be interesting. Like right now, we run on our most reliable buses are compressed natural gas, which is relatively inexpensive. Hydrogen, there's a move to hydrogen, which for us is very expensive because we don't produce hydrogen here and we have to get it from a long ways away and it's expensive. We've tried electric buses a little bit, and I have to say that the districts that accepted electric buses really early on, those buses are mostly sitting because they just don't work yet. The technology just isn't there yet. So I do think we're going to be able to, as time progresses, I think we'll be able to hopefully lower costs so that we can provide more service. I mean, because that's the objective. If we can lower some of our costs, we can also provide more service. Because just like you either get more money or you spend less to be able to do more. And so I think that there probably are some solutions in the future. I don't know what they are yet, but we're open to them. And I have to say, RVTD is very innovative, like first district to do a CNG bus. We went on fareless, paying for how you ride the bus, fareless, adopted that technology very early on. So we are not adverse to technological advances to help create efficiencies at all. But those are just coming as they come.
Just a quick follow-up. If you extend that, is there any role for RVTD to promote Waymo in the Valley or driverless Tesla vehicles or something that would connect people in a much more efficient way?
It's possible. We just TransLink, the service that is like the Uber. The new technology that we just received, that we just bought this computer license for this computer program, that it will do that. It will be, you could call and get a vehicle or get online and get a vehicle much like Uber, which is great for the people that really need it. One of the issues too is believe it or not, we have people who don't have phones, don't have smartphones, and don't have computers. And so when you say, well, get on your smartphone and do that, there's a group of people still that are like, hey, I don't know how to do that, or I don't have the technology to do it. And so I will tell you, there's nothing like picking up a phone and actually talking to a real person and saying, hey, I need a ride from here to there, and having them help you with that.
Kelly, thank you for your presentation. Could you remind me and maybe others in the room what the special levy was for back when it was on the ballot?
Yes. So it was for two things. It was for general operating to let us continue to operate at the level we were. And I think we either added a route or we added Saturday service. It may have been Saturday service because we haven't had Saturday service forever. But everyone has come to really rely on it now. So, but when we go out for this levy in 2026, it'll be very clear what our money is buying.
Thanks for your talk. It's awesome. I'm friends with Mike, who does bike education with RVTD in Ashland, and I've spoken with him a bunch. And I'm just wondering, there's been so much money put into the road diets, and we've got all these empty bike lanes everywhere, and they seem like they're mostly empty. Ashland just did this big fancy one. And are you putting much energy toward promoting that? Because that seems like a great way to respond to less buses. Like, all right, let's get on our bikes.
I just talked to the guy who does Gus rides the bus, and he's doing some bike stuff now. And he said, we are in high demand for bikes because RVTD is a bike sort of broker, not like we get money for it, but we move bikes around, we get them donated, and we give them to people who need them. And right now there's probably, there's a great need for bikes. So we are doing that, but we're probably right now doing a little bit less of that because we're focused on the routes that we're running, and getting that up to speed and getting everyone comfortable with that.
So inspiring. It's like Santa's workshop.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Work on bikes. Always bikes being dropped off. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So if you have a bike and you want to get rid of it, call RVTD because we will help broker that bike out to someone who needs it. And thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.